Hello, and welcome to Know Before You Go, a program of the Dominican Central Province of St. Albert the Great that allows us to take a look ahead at the upcoming weekend's readings. I'm Father Jim Marchionda, the Provincial of the Chicago Dominicans, and I am very, very honored to be able to share some reflections with you for this great feast of Easter that we are about to celebrate. In the cycle of readings that we have for this coming weekend on Easter Sunday morning, we have the first reading from the Acts of the Apostles. It's a tremendous example of how Peter changed from being someone who rarely understood what Jesus was saying to being a bold preacher, a proclaimer of the good news of the resurrection, and standing before all the people of Jerusalem and telling and giving witness to who Jesus Christ was for him, for them, and for us. It's great to see the transition that Peter makes from having made so many mistakes during the lifetime of Jesus to how he is now as a preacher of the resurrection. For the second reading this weekend, you're going to have an option between Paul's letter to the Colossians or Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. If the reading you hear is the one to Colossians, you are going to hear that we are raised with Christ, which for me means we're part of the glory. We are part of the glory of the resurrection. And because of that, Paul says to the Colossians, then think of what is above. Think of things above, not of things below. That means raise our minds, raise our hearts, think bigger, pray bigger, believe more profoundly than you ever have before. So he's really challenging them to an active faith because of what happened to Jesus Christ and therefore what happens for us. And he's challenging us to a broader, bigger, stronger, more meaningful faith by thinking of things that are above and not limiting ourselves to things that are below. If, on the other hand, your church uses this reading of St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, you're going to hear the contrast or the comparison of yeast and dough. And you're going to hear the challenge to clear out the old and bring on the new. I think that's another great challenge for us. This year, when we hear the news of the resurrection yet again, what do we have to clear out that's old? What in our thinking do we need to get rid of? What in sometimes our heavy hearts do we need to let go of? What is the old that we must separate ourselves from so as to take on some new, fresh ideas about our faith, about our practice of spirituality, about our practice of Christianity? After that, we'll have the Easter sequence, which we get as a beautiful hymn of praise because of the feast. And then we move into the Gospel of John. And the Gospel of John is one that's very dramatic, but it also is very interesting in this cycle. In this Gospel, we receive not an image of the appearance of Jesus, we receive an empty tomb. Mary is the first one to go to the tomb and discover that it is empty. And she fears that the body of Jesus has been stolen. So she runs in her panic and her fear back to the disciples where they are gathered together. And she just shouts out, "They have taken the Lord. They have taken the Lord." And you've got Peter and John then racing to the tombs themselves to find out what has happened. And you know the story of John being younger, so John arrives first. But he waits out of respect for Peter to look in first. They look in, they see the burial cloths there. They're not sure as to what has happened, and yet the gospel says John believed. What we are given this Easter Sunday of 2017 is not an appearance of the risen Lord. We are given instead an empty tomb. And we are given in the emptiness of the tomb possibly a very important preaching for us at this point in human history. I read a number of years ago, actually in 2010, 7 years ago now, in the Canadian missal, Living with Christ, a wonderful, wonderful little entry that acted as though it were an excerpt from Peter's journal on that Easter night. I'd like to share that with you as it's so beautiful. Imagine this coming from the journal of St. Peter on the night of the resurrection. I don't know what to think. Mary of Magdala is such a good woman. She wanted me to go to the tomb, the last place I wanted to be. John wanted to go as well. Ah, the optimism of youth and the folly of women. But how could I expect to find anything but emptiness? Although I was breathing, I felt like a dead man. My shame over my denial of Jesus had paralyzed me. I had no tears left. I felt as if I were merely going through the motions as I approached the tomb. It was empty, just as Mary had said, but I was totally unprepared. The emptiness was full. I had forgotten how often God comes in the emptiness of my life. Even though I have only seen an empty tomb, my heart is full. The story is not over. In some ways, I think it has just begun. Can it be that I will somehow be able to tell Jesus how sorry I am for abandoning him? I must gather the 11. We must be alert and ready for the Lord. He is risen. I can feel his love. I must find a way to ask his forgiveness, to tell him that I love him. Whatever he has yet to ask of me, I will do. This time, I will not fail him. What a wonderful, wonderful short piece of writing that helps us imagine what Peter may have written in his journal as he left the empty tomb that day. It's a good teaching for us too. Sometimes we don't have all the flowery, positive, affirming experiences of faith that we want. Sometimes we face emptiness in our own lives. And when we participate in some of the emptiness of the larger world, we know, in fact, there is darkness and there is emptiness. And yet, God will never abandon us. That's the most important thing of the resurrection. God will never let go of us. God will never let go of you. Even in your emptiness, even when you don't feel it, God will never let go of you. The resurrection is real, and we are part of the reality. God bless you on this wonderful feast of Easter 2017. And as the psalm says, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. Happy Easter.